this is hashtag heat culture. Now we can mock it, we could say it's overdone, we could say they're smug about it and self-righteous, and it gets a little annoying and grating, and it does, but there is something real to it. And there are only a handful of teams, and this is my 28th season, there's only a handful of teams that I have covered, seen, witnessed the way they operate over the last 28 years that you could say have a definable, sustained, consistent culture in a positive way. And the Heat are one of them. And like, you can mock it, but this shit is real. And part of that is we have these rules, we have these standards, and not even the star player is allowed to violate them. And there has to be accountability, and there has to be some sort of mechanism to enforce these standards and this culture that we tout so often. Well, this is how you do it. This is heat culture in action.
He is a senior NBA writer for The Ringer, and he is the author of Basketball, The Impossible Collection. We welcome back Howard Beck onto Hoopsology. Welcome back.
Gentlemen, good to see you again. It's been a while. I can't remember how long, but a bit.
It's been a minute. Good to see you. Lots to discuss, as always, within just not only the NBA, but the basketball world. Before we delve into kind of the hot topics, what's going on with the league, I want to delve into your latest book. I find it truly fascinating. Got it just an early copy and just looking through it. Really fascinating just in terms of what this book represents in regards to capturing just the best moments within basketball. So can you kind of detail your involvement with the book and just the creative process in making this happen?
Yeah, no, and thank you for that. So basketball, the Impossible Collection series is the publisher's the label for all this, right? So the idea was, they want to create this high end, and it's certainly high end and very heavy. I hope you didn't throw your back out when it arrived. It's a coffee table book that is 100 moments in basketball. And the pitch to me at the time was, this doesn't have to be the best 100 moments. It doesn't have to be the most important 100 moments. It is just 100 moments, which was a really fascinating thought process for me and exercise because, wow, in the history of the NBA, we're coming up on, we're getting closer to 80 years now, 70 something. There's a lot. There's a hell of a lot. And there's a lot that I've witnessed. There's a lot that I'm vaguely aware of from when I'm a kid. And there's a lot that's before my time on Earth. Where do I even begin? And so I think the fun of this was, just trying to, first I just started jotting down moments. And it was a lot of stuff okay, what was the stuff I was there for, right? I covered Shaq and Kobe's entire run. So, okay, there's a bunch of moments there. Obviously, Jordan's final shot is going to be something. A bunch of other MJ things are immediately spring to mind, right? Magic Johnson, jumping center in the finals. There's just all these moments that we know are the usual standbys. But there was no requirement that this had to be the 100 moments. And so what I thought was, I want this book to be something where if you pick this up, don't pick it up. It's heavy. Just flip it through it on a coffee table, wherever you see it. When you're flipping through it, it should give you a sense of the history of the NBA without being a history book, if that makes sense. This is not going to tell you every last thing you need to know. This is not a long Wikipedia entry. This is not an encyclopedia. This is 100 cool moments, important moments, fun moments, historic moments, history-making moments. And so that's what I tried to do. It couldn't be comprehensive. It couldn't be, the be all end all. So that's how we approached it. And the publisher, I hope I'm pronouncing the name correctly, Assoulin, Assoulin. They're incredible at producing these high end books. Very glossy, the highest resolution, the highest quality of paper. I don't even have the vocabulary because I'm not a publisher, but it is the highest quality of everything. And then you've got, of course, the pebbled feel on the cover, just like a basketball. And they did an amazing job. So picking the 100 moments and then writing, this was a 5,000 word or so essay that kind of threads through the book. It was just kind of this fun exploration for me, just kind of dive into basketball history.
Through this process, did your opinions of the game change just through rewriting the essay and just combing through all these moments, did just your appreciation of the game either change positively or negatively at all?
I don't think so. I think it was just, every kind of rabbit hole you chase in researching something like this is a reminder of just kind of the artistry of the game, the importance of the game in our culture, right? Because it intersects with fashion, it intersects with politics, it intersects with activism, it intersects with the civil rights era, intersects with all these different wrinkles in modern history. And so I'm a sports writer, and one of the things that you remind yourself of a lot, or when you're a journalist, is like the basketball. It's never just about the game, right? It's about the people who make the game, and it's about all these relationships, and then it's about what these people are doing on and off the court. And so basketball and the NBA's intersection with the civil rights era, for instance, Bill Russell's place in that, Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, then Lou Alcindor's place in that. It's just a reminder of how threaded through our history and our culture and our country this league is. And then on top of that, there's just obviously the aesthetics of it all, because, as I'm thinking of moments, I'm like, oh my God, I've got like 15 different slam dunk. I can't put 15 slam dunk photos in this thing. And I didn't make the ultimate choices, right? Like I sent them all my suggestions. I sent them like 130, 135. And they decided, they picked the 100. They picked the actual photos that would go with those moments. Obviously, some of that has to do with, what rights you could acquire and all of that too. So, but yeah, it was just a reminder too of like how much the game has changed over time. I opened with, as a starting point in the essay, I opened with the Wilt Chamberlain photo, obviously the only one we really have of Wilt Chamberlain's 100-point game, where he's sitting there with the piece of paper that just says 100 on it, which is now this like wonderful meme that everyone's spun off of. Like every time anybody hits any kind of milestone in the NBA and even in other sports, sometimes it's like, write it on a piece of paper and hold it up. Like that photo is really important. And I write this in the book, like this photo, like there's no basketball in this photo. There's literally not a ball. There's no court. There's no rim. There's no anything. There's just this young man in a jersey, I think that says Phila, because back then we had really strange abbreviations, and the little handwritten 100 that Harvey Pollack gave him. That's it. One of the most important moments, iconic moments in basketball history. All we have is this photo of a guy with a piece of paper that says 100. And Wilt obviously is the epitome of the traditional big man, right? Just this towering, powerful figure, physically imposing, and that's what the center was for the longest time. And then by the time we get to the end of the book, I wanted a photo of, and they found the photos that were appropriate to represent this, of Wembanyama versus Chet Holmgren, because the evolution of the big man, the evolution of the game, is something that I found fascinating as I'm delving into 70-something years of this to try to find the right moments. And so a lot of what I write about in the essay, and I think what the book kind of demonstrates, is just the pure evolution of the game, and just how different it is today. But through it all, we are just as awestruck today as fans of the game, watching Wembanyama play and seeing the things he can do at his size. I think we have the same feeling of awe and appreciation and thrill that somebody would have if they were among the 3,500 people in that gym in Hershey, Pennsylvania, watching Wilt Chamberlain score 100 points, or if they were fortunate enough to watch him anywhere else at that time.
Yeah, well said, Howard. Along those lines, in terms of the obscurity of that iconic moment for Wilt Chamberlain in basketball history, I'm wondering, for those moments in your research, were there any eras or types of moments that were tougher to dig up material on compared to others? I mean, obviously, earlier eras, maybe that comes to mind, but maybe there's other distinctions depending on the type of the moment.
Yeah, I think part of the difficulty was, I've been writing about this game for a long time, but I know the eras that I've covered best. Even in the 80s, a time way before the internet, way before satellite TV, And, NBA games are occasionally on national TV. But I grew up in San Jose, California, in the Bay Area at a time when the Warriors were not good. They were not good for most of my life growing up. The Raiders, the Niners, the A's, the Giants, like these were the teams that captured everybody's imagination in the Bay Area. And so there wasn't a lot of basketball on in my household. So even the 80s are a little bit of a haze for me. It's not until the 90s and the rise of the Bulls. And of course, we all become Jordan fans in the 90s. And so my memory of the NBA, firsthand memory really starts in the 90s. So the 80s, got a sense of what's happening because I'm alive during that time, but I'm not watching a ton of it. The 70s, forget it. 60s, 50s, so you're having to do a lot of research. And then along the way, I'm sending notes to the editors at Asoline saying, hey guys, how much of the black and white are we going to be able to find? Like how much of the early parts of the NBA were, and I think we kind of all agreed early on, listen, like the most of what we think of as the iconic moments or most, important moments in the NBA are happening more in the modern era anyway. It's okay if we're very heavy on the 80s forward. And I was very relieved when we all agreed on that part of it because, I tried to get a grasp of, and also the photographic representation of those earlier decades was challenging.
I want to hop in, Howard, into this modern topics. What comes to mind is the whole Jimmy Butler situation. A lot of discourse. He has been suspended indefinitely from the Miami Heat. What is your thoughts on this overall situation, just in terms of one, where could he go? Two, what kind of impact is he going to have on a team? And three, his legacy. I mean, he has a track record of this type of behavior. I would say this kind of goes in line with that. So in my opinion, I'm not sure this really harms his legacy too much. That's based on his track record. But kind of, what's your thoughts on this whole situation?
I want to preface this by saying that I've always been like a big Jimmy Butler fan, even going back to when he first started to break out in Chicago. I love the way the guy plays. I love what he has generally been about. Like he has been about the highest standards, right? He plays his ass off. You never have to doubt whether you're going to get the best of Jimmy Butler up until recently. And he's this star who he's almost antithetical to most modern stars, right? He is not a heliocentric guy. He's not James Harden or Russell Westbrook, in their peak years, or even a guy like Giannis or Luka. It's not, I'm going to take every shot. He's not going to have a usage rate climbing up into the mid 30s. He's not the greatest shooter or scorer in the world. He's more of a grinder. He's really a throwback in a lot of ways. Like he would have been perfect in the 90s, especially with his physicality and just his toughness and his brashness. But he doesn't have to take every shot. And he's he's a conscientious teammate, again, up until recently, on the court, right? He's a conscientious teammate. He is a guy who's more looking, I think, to facilitate than score a lot of times, and doesn't have to be, like, I've always thought he'd be the great 1B or the number 2, not a number 1, not because of any knock on him, but because he is a great kind of he's built to be a co-star. He's not a high enough of a high efficiency scorer that you're going to count on him the way you count on like a Kevin Durant or a LeBron James or a Steph Curry and just say, go get us 30 every night. That's not him. But he's always going to get you 18 to 20, and he's going to get you 7 assists and 8 rebounds and a couple of steals, and he's going to lock somebody down. There's all the nice things I can say about Jimmy Butler, which I've been saying for many, many years, and I've always really appreciated him, and I've always thought he would have been incredible next to, one of those, real top tier stars. He's in that next tier down, and again, that's not a knock by any stretch. So that's what's disappointing about where things are now, because, Justin, you asked about his legacy. I think it has taken a hit. Because someone like me, who has always admired and praised the way that Jimmy Butler carries himself, the way he plays, I look at what he's doing now, and I think like you're killing this team. Like you may think, and I had the same feeling about James Harden, whose game I was not as big of a fan of, but still, like if your beef as James Harden is with Daryl Morey, if your beef as Jimmy Butler is with Pat Riley, you don't have to sabotage all of your teammates that you quote unquote go to war with. We get all these, these phrases, these sayings that we hear from pro athletes all the time. Oh, these are my brothers. It's a brotherhood. I go to war with these guys, blah, blah, blah. No, you're not. Like you're screwing them right now. You're putting them in a really tough position. You're compromising that team. And if you have a problem with the front office because of your contract or because of whatever else, deal with that outside of it. But you still have an obligation and a contract paying you a lot of money to go out and do your job every day. And he decided to stop doing his job, or to stop doing it to the level that we've all come to expect over the years. And so then he gets suspended, and then he comes back, and then he pouts more, and he's suspended again. Now it's the third time. And yeah, his Heat career is almost certainly over. Sometime between now and a week from Thursday, he'll be traded. I'm fairly confident of that. All complications understood, right? It's hard to make a trade in the NBA. It's even harder right now under this CBA with the second apron and all these things. But they're going to find a way, and they were going to find a way anyway. And I made this point on our podcast on The Ringer, on the Real Ones today, that they've already agreed to trade you. Why are you coming back and stirring it up even more? Why are you storming out of a shoot around because, they said you're going to come off the bench? They're planning for a future without you. Of course they are, because you don't want to be there and you're not playing your hardest anymore. That's not something to be insulted by. Just do what you got to do. If you can't play to 100%, ratchet it down to 90 or wherever, whatever's comfortable, but do your job. Go to practice, go to shoot around, play in the games until they trade you. Like, what else are you, what other issue are you trying to force? You've already gotten the outcome you want, at least in agreement, which is we're going to trade you. That they haven't yet is not because they're trying to hold you hostage. It's just because it's really hard to make a deal in this league, and they're trying to get the most they can. And meanwhile, every day that passes, and every time you do something like this, you're hurting your trade value. You are making it harder for the Heat to give you what you want, which is a ticket out of town.
Howard, I'm wondering too, your thoughts on the other side of that. I mean, maybe not at this point, given that there's been multiple instances of, those outbursts and things like that from Jimmy Butler. Initially, were you surprised at all by the Heat's move to suspend? And is it a fair question to wonder if that in turn limited their trade options as well, or harmed the trade value in their act of suspension?
No, because a couple different things there. Whether you suspended him or not, the league is seeing what he's doing, right? The suspension underscores it. The suspension highlights it, and it makes this even more dramatic seeming. But the league already knows Jimmy Butler is a guy who's going to put you in a position to have to decide whether or not to suspend him because he's violating team rules and missing team planes and just being a general pain in the ass, right? So all those things are already known. The reason you almost have to suspend him, especially if you're the Heat, again, we discussed this on the Real Ones pod today as well. This is hashtag Heat culture. Now, we can mock it. We can say it's overdone. We can say they're smug about it and self-righteous, and it gets a little annoying and grating, and it does. But there is something real to it. And there are only a handful of teams, and this is my 28th season, there's only a handful of teams that I have covered, seen, witnessed the way they operate over the last 28 years that you could say have a definable, sustained, consistent culture in a positive way. And the Heat are one of them. And like, you can mock it, but this shit is real. And part of that is we have these rules, we have these standards, and not even the star player is allowed to violate them. And there has to be accountability, and there has to be some sort of mechanism to enforce these standards and this culture that we tout so often. Well, this is how you do it. This is Heat culture in action. I've heard people suggest that this is an indication that Heat culture is broken. No, if it were broken, they'd be letting him just get away with everything. That would break the culture. Because now everybody's just like, well, every man for himself, and we don't have to listen, and we don't have to do anything. We can just, do whatever we want. So to me, this is them, underscoring what that culture is and preserving it. Does it inflame the situation even more? Sure. Is it yet another signal to the league that this is a player who might be disruptive for you too? Yeah, but we already knew that. We already knew that. So I think they've done pretty much what they had to do. It's not to say that the Heat have been perfect in this. And by the way, it's also not to say that Heat culture or Spurs culture or anybody else who we ascribe a good culture to, it doesn't mean they're perfect. The Spurs got sideways with Kawhi Leonard several years ago, and that ended in them having to trade Kawhi Leonard to Toronto for probably less than they would have liked to have gotten, and they surely would have liked to have kept him for the rest of his career too. These things happen. These teams are not perfect. They're run by humans, and we're all imperfect. But having a culture means enforcing the rules as best you can and holding people to account.
A quick timeout from the interview to request a favor. If you love our interviews, please subscribe to our YouTube channel and like this video to hear more interviews from the world of basketball, featuring journalists from SB Nation, ESPN, CBS Sports, and The Athletic. Now, back to the interview. So is there any destination that he's going to be happy? Because I see the same situation happening with all these trade destinations that he's rumored to. Golden State, Phoenix. Yeah. I'm not optimistic about his future there. So what is the best case scenario for him?
I don't know. I wish I had a good answer for this. I mean, I will say when it comes to Jimmy and now people look at him as this like perpetual malcontent, understood. But just to be clear on his history, right? Like Chicago traded him because Chicago wanted to trade him. He didn't ask to be traded at that time. He didn't ask to go to Minnesota. So he ends up in Minnesota where he arguably didn't necessarily want to be. They balked at a contract, just like now. They balked at a contract extension that he wanted, and it soured him on the franchise. But he also was kind of down on Towns and Wiggins and these guys, and understandably so. Like there was it's kind of justified. All right, so he puts on a big show and he forces his way out of there. He ends up in Philly, where he fit very well, and Philly made the decision to go with Tobias Harris over him. Catastrophic decision making. And part of that too, like Ben Simmons figures into this, like Jimmy Butler was running too much of the offense. Ben Simmons is like, no, the offense is mine. I'm the point guard. So there was a lot of stuff going on there. So I don't blame Jimmy for that departure. There's really two big flare-ups, Minnesota and today with Miami. I think the real question now is not so much like what's going to make Jimmy happy. It's more like he's 35 and plays about 65% of every season, regular season, because of various bumps and bruises. Has a lot of miles on him, a lot of hard miles on him. He did play for Tibbs in a couple places. So like how much more does he have? And are you a team that it makes sense to acquire him, knowing that he may only have another year or two at whatever his peak is left? And you don't know how many games you're going to get per season. To say nothing of all the other stuff that could potentially come with it, right? So you're looking at teams, you're not looking at rebuilding teams. I don't think you're looking at necessarily like young, up and coming, like people had talked about Houston. Like, does he make sense for Houston? Like I could talk myself into it, but Jimmy Butler and Ime Udoka might just kill each other. Like talk about two hard-headed, like badasses who aren't going to take any shit from anybody. Like, but it'd be fun to watch. And yeah, could he accelerate what they're doing with a fairly young team? Fred VanVleet notwithstanding, everybody else is pretty young in that core. Maybe, but it also may be too soon to hit the gas for that team. He's not going to a rebuilding team. He's not probably going to most mid-level playoff teams. Like you want him. Ideally, he's going to a team that's like the proverbial one player away, the team that just needs somebody to get them over the hump to contend for the title. Like Denver would be really interesting to me. I always liked the idea of him going to the Warriors because I think, again, a team that has a strong culture. And yes, again, I understand Draymond has done things. They haven't always held Draymond accountable, but the Warriors have a definable culture and generally has withstood a lot. And they've won, 4 championships because of it. Could Jimmy, alongside Steph and Draymond, possibly get them back to another finals? I don't know, given where they are right now. This season has gotten really strange for them, but I still like the idea of Jimmy with the Warriors. But the reporting out of the Bay Area is that the Warriors are signaling they're not going to be in the Jimmy business. How many other teams are like one player away that he actually makes sense for? Milwaukee is an interesting possibility. And then even you have to get into the weeds about, well, do they have what it takes to make the deal in a two-way deal? And, I think ultimately wherever Jimmy ends up, and I think a lot of people around the league still feel like it's somehow going to end up being Phoenix. It's going to be complicated because Bradley Beal's got to go to a third team, and you may need a fourth or a fifth team involved, and you got to involve teams that have cap room because some of these teams have to offload salary in the process in order to get below the second apron. Like, it's going to be a mess, guys. It's going to be fascinating. It is a salary cap expert's like dream because it's going to be super complicated and nerdy and weird. But that's how it's going to have to happen. And so probably like all of these teams' problems, or maybe not their problems, all these teams' desires, right? All the guys we've been hearing rumors about, Zach LaVine, Bradley Beal, the Bucks, dangling Chris Middleton to try to get something done. The Jimmy Butler, like all these teams are going to end up like just joining into one crazy multi-team trade that gets everybody where they want to go and moves all these players around. It feels like that's where this is going. But, I've been wrong before, and this whole thing may be too complicated to actually happen. But I do think Jimmy Butler should be with a team that is trying to contend. I don't see that there's a point of having him on a team that's not.
Makes good sense. I want to zoom out, and we're mentioning a lot of different trade options, locations for Jimmy Butler. I'm wondering, Howard, if there are teams that you're looking at right now as that deadline approaches. You mentioned, rightly so, how difficult it is to get significant trades done in the NBA. But are there teams right now that you're looking at that are prime candidates who you're expecting movement from, or just hoping for movement from in order to kind of change the NBA landscape?
I don't know that I'm expecting, like, aside from what I just mentioned, right? Like, I think Milwaukee is absolutely going to do something. I think Phoenix is going to do something. And again, all the feeling around the league is that Phoenix is going to somehow find a way to get Jimmy Butler, but it requires Bradley Beal waiving his no trade clause again and finding, another team to take on his salary and one that he's willing to go to. So that's all complicated. So but those teams are ones that I kind of expect will do something. I would love to see the Warriors, the Lakers. I'm a sentimentalist, guys. So LeBron and Steph are nearing the end. Whether that's a year, 2, 3 years, whatever it is, we're getting close. Same thing with Kevin Durant. These guys are been the most enjoyable, incredible players to watch and cover in the last 15 years or so of my career. I hate seeing guys of that caliber go out on irrelevant teams. And so, I always want to see those teams make a deal of some sort. The Lakers have kind of tinkered around the edges so far. The Warriors, the same thing. Like each of those teams, acquired somebody from the tanking Nets. It's worked out better for the Lakers so far with Dorian Finney-Smith than it has for the Warriors with Dennis Schroeder. Ultimately, like I'm in favor of the craziest scenarios, right? Like I like the deals where LeBron somehow ends up on the Warriors. I don't think Steph is going to end up on the Lakers, but like LeBron to the Warriors, LeBron and Steph trying to make one more run together, like Butch and Sundance or something. Bad analogy. Those guys just get shot at. But like something like that really appeals to me. But now I'm off in fantasy land. Like that's the kind of stuff that's not going to happen. We do know that the Warriors, made those inquiries a year ago about LeBron. I don't think anything like that is likely to happen. But that's the kind of stuff I'd like to see, just because it'd be more fun to watch those guys at least have a fighting chance with each other than both stuck on teams that can't get anywhere.
Anything that you're hearing or thinking about as far as the Spurs go, with the potential that Wemby has? And I believe last time we spoke with you, we spoke in great detail about, you mentioned the strides that he made early on, and how impressive he has been. That trend continues, as you well know. Any further sense of urgency from the Spurs, an organization I wouldn't imagine would be making a hasty move, but any chance we see something from the Spurs?
The Spurs are very much methodical and rarely hasty. And they, for the longest time, were one of the only teams that had not done like an in-season trade for, it must have been like 10 or 15 years or something. And they've made a few in the last several years, but like minor ones. They were never like the team that's going to make a blockbuster on the eve of the trade deadline. It's not a Spursian thing to do. I have been of the mindset that the Spurs do not quote unquote need to make an all-in move now or hit the gas because Wemby's playing like an MVP. It's great that he is. It's great that they're flirting with a possible playoff spot or play-in spot that might lead to a playoff spot. Like, it's all cool, but he's only 21 and in year 2. There's no rush here. You do not have to do anything, especially as long as he's on board with it all. And it seems like he is. Like, he seems to have a really good head on his shoulders. I think it's part of the appeal of Wembanyama and part of his greatness is that he sees the big picture. He's not going to be stomping his feet saying, go get me help. Like, that's not him, and certainly not this stage of his career. And I think the Chris Paul acquisition before the season was brilliant. I think he's done a hell of a lot to help accelerate Wembanyama's development and the rest of their young guys. So that's been a really nice kind of stopgap. And obviously, Chris Paul's not a long-term solution, which brings us to De'Aaron Fox, right? So it was just earlier this afternoon as we're taping this that the reports came out from multiple places that De'Aaron Fox would like to move on, and the Kings are trying to find a way to satisfy that desire. And there's been allusions to he's got a team in mind, a destination in mind, and everybody's being very coy about it. But everybody around the league has been speculating about, and especially when things were going south before Mike Brown got fired in Sacramento, there was already starting to be a lot of speculation about De'Aaron Fox and where would he go, and that the Spurs and the Rockets were teams to keep an eye on. The Rockets today, in the wake of the De'Aaron Fox report, there have been reports out of Houston saying that the Rockets are saying we're not going to be in that chase. I take that for what it's worth. It's probably the case, but often teams will do that just to like keep the waters calm, not show their hand, and also make sure that they don't, like, especially with a young team, you don't want to unnerve your guys and make them think that they might all be on the trade block. But San Antonio makes so much sense. Maybe they will end their however many year streak of never making a massive, trade in the middle of a season, and maybe they'll be the ones to go get De'Aaron Fox. Like, De'Aaron Fox and Wembanyama together would be phenomenal. I don't know what the Spurs have to give up in that deal. Probably Stephon Castle, who, the whole league is, seems very high on, and I'm sure the Spurs are very high on. They've got other young guys, you could work with in a trade, whether it's Vassell, Sohan, Keldon Johnson. Like, there's a lot of different ways you could go here. And the Spurs, I think, are 3rd or 4th in the league in terms of most first-round picks that they're sitting on. They might be 4th. I think Oklahoma, Brooklyn, and Utah might be the top 3, but the Spurs have a ton of first-round picks. So there seems to be like a lot of potential there. I don't know if a De'Aaron Fox trade will happen by the trade deadline. I don't know where he'll land, but the Spurs are a really fun possibility.
So we've talked about some contending teams. I want to talk about some the stinkers, with the purpose of them being in contention for the Cooper Flag sweepstakes. So first, what's your overall opinion of Cooper Flag, number one? And number two, do you see any tanking right now, kind of that is reminiscent of other top players that went high in the draft that teams were gunning against? Is he that type of pick where you're going to see? I know the NBA's made an effort to curve, tanking, but do you think in terms of teams that they're really eyeing Cooper Flag as a generational pick?
When the season started, people were saying, yes, Cooper Flag, the consensus number one, but keep an eye on Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey, the teammates at Rutgers. And there's a bunch of others in the tier right behind them. This is considered to be a really strong draft. I am not a draft guy, so I will always defer on these questions to the guys who spend hours and hours and days and travel all over the place to watch these guys in person. I'm not a scout. I'm not going to try to tell you what Cooper Flag is going to be, but the people who know are incredibly high on Cooper Flag. And I think by this stage in late January, as opposed to late October or November, people have kind of coalesced around the idea that, these other guys are good. Like Dylan Harper's great. Ace Bailey's, these are great prospects, but Cooper Flag is definitely going to be number one, no matter who wins the lottery. I think that has become more cemented over the course of this season. Is he worth thanking for? Like, this is one of those years where everybody believes, yes, Like teams were planning for this. Teams were, when considering which way to go, there were teams that were, putting a bookmark on this season saying this is the time to do it if you're ever going to steer into being bad. What's interesting about the tanking race, though, to me is, you've got Washington and Brooklyn who were clearly telegraphing what they were intending. Utah's been trying to play both sides for the last couple of years. Ever since they traded Donovan Mitchell and Rudy Gobert, they've been like, oh, we're still going to contend or compete hard, and we're still going to, we're not tanking. We're holding on to Larry Markkinen. We're holding on to Colin Sexton and Jordan Clarkson and all these guys. And here we are. Utah's got the second worst record of the NBA right now and is slotted second in the draft if things ended today. So you've got them. Charlotte's not trying to be bad. They just can't get their shit together. Toronto has been in a state of pseudo rebuild for the last couple of years. And now that here they are again, as we speak, they've won 4 in a row. Like, are the Raptors going to play their way out of great lottery position here? Portland has been trying to get good and just can't get their stuff together either and haven't quite figured it out. The Pelicans were supposed to be good. So, like, I'm pointing to all the teams that are, like, I'm looking at tankathon.com, wonderful website. These are the teams that are in competition for Cooper Flag in terms of lottery balls, ping pong balls, lottery odds. Washington, Utah, New Orleans in order, Charlotte, Brooklyn, Toronto, the next 3, then Portland, and then, my gosh, Philly of all things, which is another weird wrinkle here because, like, Philly's got the 8th worst record and their pick is going to the Thunder, but it's top 6 protected. So if the Sixers decided in the next week, you know what, this season's toast, screw it, we'll just shut down everybody and we'll lean into the tank. Philly could try to compete with those other teams, quote unquote compete, and be in the top 6. And if the lottery balls fall their way and they stay in the top 6, Philly keeps their pick. They get a top 6 pick to add to Embiid, Paul George, and Tyrese Maxey. More likely, Philly just keeps meandering along here and they lose their pick and it goes to the Thunder, who will be competing for a championship at the same time that they are getting a pretty nice lottery pick, most likely. But the lottery race is crowded, and it's crowded for a reason. But I will say, like, as we get past the trade deadline and as teams realize that some of their seasons are, unsalvageable, it will get more crowded and it will get uglier. But some of these teams did not start out the season thinking they were tanking. Like the Pelicans, 3rd worst record in the NBA. They did not intend this to be a tanking season, but here we are.
Does this ultimately prove that there's nothing Adam Silver can do about tanking? If there's a top draft pick, teams are going to, gun for the top player available no matter what he can do in terms of innovations or play-in tournaments or incentives. It's just this is how sports works.
I will say the creation of the play-in tournament, whatever, they changed up the lottery odds a few years ago. The combination of those two things has made things better. It didn't eliminate tanking, but it incentivized more teams to compete deeper into the season and to not pull the plug as soon. Because, if you're in playoff range, you're trying to get the top 6 to avoid the play-in. If you're in 7 to 10 range, you're trying to maybe get to 6 to avoid the play-in. But within the 7 to 10, you're now jockeying for position within that because there's various advantages to being in each of those slots. And if you're just outside of the 7 to 10 range, you're trying to play to get into the 7 to 10 range, right? But in a year where there's a Cooper Flag or, a Victor Wembanyama, obviously they're not in the same category, but still, when you have a consensus number 1 who everybody believes is a franchise changer, you're going to have teams who are like, you know what, we were going to be bad anyway, let's just be a little bit worse. What's the difference between being 30 wins bad or 25 wins bad or 20 wins bad? We're bad either way. We might as well be bad and increase our lottery odds. And even the reshuffling of the lottery odds to make it flatter at the top has not completely thwarted tanking strategies, but it's minimized it. And besides that, we've had teams leaping up from outside the top 3 multiple times since they changed up the lottery odds, including when the Pelicans got Zion. Hasn't worked out so well, but like, just being one of the worst 3 teams is not guaranteeing you anything. And so that should be a disincentive, but teams are still going to play the odds. You want a real solution? People can go Google Mike Zarin, Zarren, and wheel. Mike Zarin is the longtime front office executive with the Boston Celtics, incredibly smart dude. Mike Zarin created this thing probably 10, 12 years ago. Zach Lowe wrote about it brilliantly for Grantland back in the day. And the wheel is basically every team gets every pick in the draft on a 30-year cycle. But it's not 1 through 30. It's not an order. It's in grouping. So like in any like I think 6 years, in any 5-year span, you have a top 6 pick, or any 6-year span, you have a top 5 pick, something like that. But you'll cycle through. So one year you might get the 3rd pick. The next year you might get the 18th pick. The next year, so over 30 years, you'll have picked in every spot in the first round, and it takes all the tanking away. There's no incentive to tank whatsoever if the picks are predetermined on a 30-year cycle. And it also makes them really interesting as trade assets, because you could say, hey, listen, guys, would you like the 17th pick in 2028? Because we have that. Oh, you'd rather have the 4th pick, which we have in 2020. Well, we can do that, but you would know what picks you own, exactly where they are, and how to value them. You won't know who the players are that year. Perhaps they might be 12 years old right now, if you're going too far out. But Mike Zarin's wheel was rejected at the league level, at the competition committee level, I think, when it was discussed. But I think it's fascinating, and I think if your goal is to eliminate tanking and just kind of create a different kind of value system, I think it's fascinating. So people can go read up on that.
Last question before we let you go. What other surprises have you seen from this season? The Cavaliers are making a statement in the Eastern Conference. We've seen the Timberwolves take a step back. Has there anything that's surprised you so far as we head into the All-Star break?
I mean, I'm not entirely shocked by the Timberwolves. I didn't like the trade for them at the time that they made it. I liked it better for the Knicks than for them. But that was a financial move. That was financially driven because of luxury tax issues and second apron issues and all this. So I thought Minnesota would be better than they are, but I did not think they were going to play to the level of last season. I knew they'd take a step back. The Cavaliers absolutely have just like blown everybody away. I don't mean just on the court. I mean like just the fact that they're doing what they're doing on the court has blown everybody away. I thought they'd be good. I'm a big Kenny Atkinson fan. Known him a long time since he was assistant coach under Mike D'Antoni with the Knicks, and later when Kenny was here in Brooklyn coaching the Nets. He has, had a lot of different stops and a lot of different influences under, coaches he's coached under, including Steve Kerr with the Warriors, and including Ty Lue in LA, Rick Adelman back in the day. Like Kenny's an offensive innovator. He's a creative guy. I thought he would bring the best out of them. He has, but I did not see this coming. So there's a pleasant surprise. I think we have too many unpleasant surprises, right? Like the Sixers just absolutely imploding. I get it. Like some people say, well, what'd you expect? These guys are always, I know, but like I thought Embiid might actually stay healthy this season. Did not see that. And Paul George, and just general malaise overcome that team so quickly. The Kings are just like every few weeks, like I didn't see them being as bad as they were. That was a surprise. I didn't think they'd fire Mike Brown, so that was a surprise. And I didn't think they'd fire Mike Brown so clumsily. And then I didn't think they'd like go on a huge winning streak under Doug Christie, who's never been a head coach before. And then just when you think, all right, well, they've straightened their season out and they've won like 11 of their last 14 or something, and everybody's happy under Doug Christie, and suddenly De'Aaron Fox is pushing for a trade. Like, I feel bad for Kings fans. I spent a good portion of my life in Northern California and went to school near Sacramento. So it's tough. Plus, all the years I covered the Lakers, and there was all those great Lakers-Kings battles in the playoffs. And so I have a very strong appreciation for Kings fans who are incredibly passionate and love their team and have been just put through hell for the last 20 years. And they just started to turn the corner the last couple of years. And this is where they land. So it's unfortunate.
No, it's a shame they had lots of momentum. They had like the beam. It seems like things were turning in a positive direction and things have imploded. It's a bummer because I thought they were going to be kind of the new school in a new school of teams in terms of the Western Conference, but looks like they're going to have to go do another rebuild. Howard, this has been a fantastic chat. Thank you very much for spending some time with us. Can you please let our audience know again where you can find you on social media and any other projects you're working on as well?
Yeah, for sure. Appreciate you guys having me back again. You can find me on Blue Sky. You can still see me on Twitter, but I'm not really doing anything on that platform anymore. So come find me on Blue Sky. I'm at howardbeck.bsky.social on Blue Sky. I'm very active there. Again, not so much so on the other platform. And of course, you can find all my work at theringer.com and catch me every Tuesday on the Real Ones podcast, along with Logan Murdoch and Raja Bell. And I do have a few stories in the works that I don't want to tip my hand on just yet, but they're all landing somewhere leading into All-Star Weekend, through All-Star Weekend, and I think shortly after All-Star Weekend. So lots coming, keeping me busy. But Justin, Matt, appreciate you guys having me back. It's been fun.
Awesome. Thanks, Howard.